Peace and love, family. Peace and love. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr.maat. Before we get tonight's discussion started, I want to let you know I sincerely apologize for not being live on Saturdays. You all are used to seeing me every Saturday. I was going strong for some time, but I have so much that so many announcements. A lot of great things have been happening, and just for the community, a lot of great things have been happening. A lot of partnerships have been formed. And so a lot has been going on. It's like I just want to tell you so much, but I don't want to ruin it right now. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but I have so many announcements to make. And so, please forgive me for that. I see Dr. Wright has joined us. She is in the building. Peace to readings by Kali, Lafayette Queen. Peace to the New Black World Order. Peace to you, brother. Peace to you, CJ Young, and my sister LaDoja Wright. Peace to you, beloved. All right, let's get started. Fam. Let's get started. But when we start, I got to play my daggone intro. Oh, and another announcement. Now, I can tell you this. I'm going to be on Revolt TV. I'm super excited about that. We're going to air the episode on Monday. Not air it, I'm sorry. We're going to record the episode on Monday, and it's going to air on Friday. And the topic is about interracial relationships and marriages, because we see, an increase of propaganda, a lot of propaganda promoting interracial, marriages and relationships. And we've seen an increase in that. And so we're going to discuss that. We're also going to discuss the increase in Black women participating in interracial relationships. So if you're connected to me, you already know that I'm going to, what my opinion is on it. And I'm going to be stating my position from a Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist position. All right. And so we're going to record it on Monday. And they were like, oh, we've been watching your podcast and we've seen your interviews and we were on your Instagram page and we really want you on Revolt TV. And I was like, okay, cool. But I just want you to know that I'm going to keep it all the way Black. Okay. All the way Black. So just know who you're asking to come on your platform. Okay. And so anyway, I'll be on their platform on Monday. It's going to air Friday, and I'll make sure that I send you all the flyer and the link. So when it airs live, we can watch it all together, or we could have a watch party. I can go live or here. And then when they air it, we can all kind of watch it together on Friday. All right. And just share and let me know if that's what you all want to do. I'm looking at the comments. If that's what you all want to do, please let me know. All right, family, let's get it started. Where's my intro? Here we go.
Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.
Abibi Fahodiye, peace to all of my truth seekers and truth thinkers. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr. Maat. Thank you for joining another powerful discussion. And tonight I have with me another powerful guest, but she is no stranger. She is no stranger to the community. Dr. Tyrene Wright, how are you doing tonight, my sister?
I'm well. Can you hear me well?
I hear you. The sound is a little,
okay,
something is moving. I don't know if you're moving something.
Well, I was trying to see if I should increase the sound, meaning I have a microphone that I can use.
Okay, no, just keep it just like that, but don't fiddle with anything because it sounds like sounds like this. Like you know what I mean? So so just leave it like that, Doc, okay?
Okay.
Just leave it. But how you doing, Doc? How
are
you?
Good to see you.
Nice to see you again. And I look forward to this discussion because when you came on the last time, we were talking about your book. Yes. This is it right here, family. Booker T. Washington in Africa, the making of a Pan-Africanist. We were discussing your book, and you did not get an opportunity to talk about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Dubois. And so when you got off the phone, when you got off the interview, when we finished the interview, we got on the phone and you were like, look, I need to come back so that we can
Right.
really unpack this. And I'm so glad that you said that, because literally the white liberals who have given us the history of Booker T. Washington has convinced many of us that Booker T and W.E.B. Dubois were like arch enemies, right? And
Right.
so when I brought Professor James Small on to talk about Booker T and W.E.B. Dubois, he said no. He said that that really wasn't the case. They may have had he said differing ideologies, but they weren't enemies. In a sense that they didn't like each other, or he said it wasn't that. But anyway, Doc. So you're here tonight to clear it up. Family, take a moment out to thumb up this video. Please thumb up this video. Also share the video. This video, sharing is caring. Also, if you're watching this broadcast from another platform, please head on over to YouTube, type in Dr. Maat, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, you will be notified. And trust me, I'm not like Dr. Bois Watkins in them and going live every 5 minutes. I don't do that. So you'll probably get a notification from me maybe like twice a week, if that. Okay. Also, family, join me back here on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Read Book Club. Our next book is going to be Booker T. Washington in Africa, Booker T. Washington and Africa, the making of a Pan-Africanist. So please, please, please get your book as soon as possible. We're going to discuss the preface in chapter 1 next Sunday, not this Sunday, not tomorrow, but next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure that you grab your book. Doc, you said we sold you out you sent me a message and said you literally sold out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we back in stock? Are we
So
good?
the second will be back in stock, and the books I'm sure will go out on the 3rd. And so I've been communicated with. There's some people who ordered recently. I don't know that we communicated with just yet, but most of the people that ordered during that big rush, they know that we had to restock, because you're right. You sold me out. Like, that was it.
I love you all. Everyone under the sound of my voice. I love you so much.
You all as well. And I've had people who in the past I would order books, and sometimes they'll ask me, so what do you want me to say, or just like they would want a dialogue, and my only request is that you share it, because this information belongs to us. This belongs to us, and so share it. Like, so when you read your book, pass it on to somebody.
That's right.
And let them read it, and because I think what happens with this kind of information, it becomes extremely exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of why this scenario exists is because of the fact that this history has been in other people's hands, not in our own.
Facts.
Right?
Facts.
So,
absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, not in this conversation, but maybe at another point in time, I would discuss the politics behind the book. But it's a specific reason why I chose to take the book back from an academic press and go a different route, because of the simple fact that to write only to a very small group, well, you're a professor, to only a small group of people, in a journal, in journals, in exclusive spaces, doesn't socialize the information. And this information needs to be socialized in our community. This needs to be common knowledge.
Absolutely.
Exclusive knowledge.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Family, this is the website that you're looking at. Dr. Wright, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So family, please head on over to Booker T. Washington in Africa.com to order the book. So you come to the website, click on order the book, order book. And let me copy this and paste it in the chat. So you come in, you order the book, you click buy now, okay? And then you pay with your credit card or PayPal or whatever. All right, and she'll get the book right on over to you, family.
Yes.
All right, so make sure that you get your copy ASAP. Copies will go out on May the 3rd, okay? Copies will go out on May the 3rd. and it's the preface in chapter 1. They aren't, it's not lengthy, right? I think the preface is maybe
Sure.
4 or 5 pages. Chapter 1 is like 7 pages, so you'll have more than enough time to read and be ready for the discussion on May the 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, Doc, I want to say something
Mhm.
to you publicly.
Mhm.
And this was something that you and I actually talked about on the phone, but
Mhm.
I won't name drop anyone.
Okay.
But I do want to say
Mhm.
that, first of all, I commend you for doing this research,
Okay.
because prior to your research,
Mhm.
no one put Booker T. Washington in the, when we think of the pantheon of Pan Africanists, right?
Mhm.
No one would put Booker T there, right? Booker
Right.
T. Washington was called an accommodationist.
Mhm.
He was called an Uncle Tom. I mean, all sorts of really nasty names. And
Right.
so when you literally comb through those 15 volumes, 300 pages per volume,
Plus.
and then
Yeah.
and to plus, right, in
Mhm.
order to, so we're looking at thousands and thousands of pages that
Mhm.
you comb through to bring us this work.
Mhm.
You helped to change, you changed my perception of Booker T. Washington, and I grew a tremendous appreciation for
Oh.
his work and who he is. But what I have noticed in our community,
Mhm.
there are people,
Mhm.
elders, some
Mhm.
educators, some with PhDs, some with,
Yeah.
who still want to hold on to the old, to the traditional or common perspective of Booker T. Washington. And
Mhm.
what I charge everyone to do is to not allow, don't get so comfortable with your views and beliefs. You know how sometimes, Doc, we get so comfortable with our views and beliefs that when someone comes along and they show and they provide us with information that's contrary to what we view, what we believe, what we think, we want to, there's that cognitive dissonance. So we want to do everything to hold on to it, right?
Mhm.
Instead of saying, hey, well, let me check out and hear what this sister is saying, and let me go and vet it. And if it's
Mhm.
right and exact, then let me now adjust my thinking. Now
Right.
let me adjust our views. But what I've noticed in our community is, despite the evidence that's coming out, some people still want to hold on to outdated views and opinions. What's your thoughts on that, Doc?
Well, so you're an educator like I am, so we know that there's nothing wrong with ignorance, not knowing, right? There's nothing wrong with it. We rely on it, matter of fact, right? Because this is how we earn a living. We teach people. But the problem, the difference is willful ignorance.
Mm.
Okay, so when you have the opportunity to get additional information and you choose not to, that's something different. That's called willful ignorance. And I'm trying to make sure I'm not like, this light is seems like it's not a good thing.
Doc, don't worry
um,
about it. Don't worry about it, Doc.
Willful ignorance is when you have an opportunity to know more, get more information, but you reject the opportunity to get the information and you continue with being, you consciously decide to be ignorant to the facts. So, what can you do? And then this is the other thing too. Yes, we have some people who are, see, a lot of people around this Du Bois Washington issue and Booker T. Washington in general, they're very ideological, right? Because a certain perspective has been sold to them. And so they assume that the researcher is ideological with it and not scientific and factual. Do you get what I'm saying? So, for example, years and years ago, I was at an academic conference, and a colleague of mine, his wife said to me, "Oh, you must love your school, Tuskegee." And I was like, "What?" And because she assumed that if I was doing certain work on Washington, that this must be from some alumni fervor or some fanatical fervor,
Mm.
desire to, elevate Washington and redeem him. And that's not what it is at all. These are historical facts. that we have access to and should have always been accessing if we did not allow other people to tell us and do this interpretation for us. And so that's really what it is. I'm brave enough as the researcher, as the historian, to tell the truth, regardless of how people feel about it, right? And that's part of the reason why the book is written the way it is, because it is a teaching book. So the very traditional academic way is like for you to just have those endnotes at the back, and
Right.
you got to go all the way to the back to figure out like who, what, where. And I changed the format of the book and said, no, we're going to do footnotes, not endnotes. So you could go to the bottom of each page and find out exactly where that document came from in the Booker T. Washington papers.
Love it.
And or any corroborating evidence that's related to what is being said on that page. And those of us who are in, who know the difference between, well, not the difference, but people who are into pedagogy, that is a, aggressive teaching method.
Absolutely.
To be able to cite, give information and then go right to the source so that could be corroborated and or the evidence is right there. So I'm not ideological with it. So I don't have a whole lot of course, culturally, personally, I have feelings about my people, which is why I feel like this is something should be common knowledge for us. But as far as I'm not into personality cults.
Come on, Doc. Come on.
And I totally look at our ancestors and ancestors who were leadership for our community. I look at them as people we can examine and then take the best of whatever they had to offer and bring it forward. Right. And so I'm not afraid to criticize any historical figure and you'll see that in the preface where I'm talking about that, whatever Washington was or wasn't, in the books, in between the pages, in the pages of books written by us, we will praise or condemn him.
Come on.
We have to be brave enough to do that. So if he didn't do, or if he was doing what some people speculated, and in this book, I do give him criticism, great criticism, but I also understand the larger picture in the bigger story, right? Which is that what is being studied in here is his transformation. And that's something that we as a community of people, we are very sensitive. Like we can't ever study the transformation. So Malcolm's one of the few people who offered up his transformation or his return to his original philosophical leanings, meaning his parents were Garveyites, and he, in my argument, I say he returned to that because he was not like just flailing. He came from a strong background, but Absolutely. He goes through a transformational period while he's in prison. He's one of the few people who offers up his transformation. But for us to talk about any of the rest and their transformation is almost like taboo. Well, here, part of what this book is about Washington's transformation from that lowest point, which is, a case that people like to cite, the Togo, to his transformation when he is negotiating on the behalf of Liberia and debunking the African exclusion measure, both major situations that would impact the lives of African people internationally and domestically, and challenging who he needed to challenge when he needed to challenge them. Why? Because it's consistently telling you who he's serving. He's serving African people. So if he's got to challenge U.S. legislation in his service, or if he has to challenge, colonial regime on the continent of Africa, that's who he's challenging. So, my point is that we have to get beyond the personality cult and understand that even this book is not really about Washington. It's about us and about how he served us and the way in which he served us. And can we utilize that model to serve African people.
That's
That's really it's what it's about. It's not about him, but we're so that's our orientation, right? We're so fixated on the individual, that we can't that folks can't get that. So you must be a Booker T. Washingtonite. It's like, no, let me just tell you something. Like, I love whoever serves African people well. Like, get out of here. Right.
right.
So,
Exactly.
but I get why people they're like that. The people who say that are like that, right?
Actually, it's,
So,
they're projecting it. They're
right, of
projecting. It's
course.
projection. Absolutely.
That's what it would have to be for them, right? So
Absolutely.
they can't imagine anything else. Because I listen, if you catch me, you can catch me on the airwaves. I criticize some of our folks, meaning that I criticize um, people like Martin Luther King. However, what I'm criticizing and critiquing is the fact that he actually made some level of transformation where there was a time in his life where he swore that he would not work with any woman, okay, or have any woman visible in his leadership. And the most dominant woman, Ella Baker, who was the machine behind what he was doing, was totally invisible, to writing Maya Angelou and saying, come back here, I
Mm.
want to work with you, right? But we can't talk about that transformation because we too sensitive. Like, don't talk about King. Like, no, let's talk about King. Let's talk about what happened during that period that made him go from being a chauvinist who was advancing our interests in larger society, but had that unbelievable contradiction, okay,
Mm. Mm.
to being someone to say, come here, sister, we're gonna work and fight and struggle against this thing together. What
That's right.
happened? What happened? And that studying that transformation allows us to give prescription and instruction to the next generation
Mm.
if we can get over ourselves. Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. And Doc, I think we have to give people room to evolve.
Right.
Like that was perfectly, not saying that what he believed initially and that male chauvinist stuff was right, but we had to give him grace to evolve, and that's what happened.
Right.
It's funny when I think of this whole cancel culture. People will dig up stuff from 20, 30 years ago. Oh, it's and you got to give people chance to grow, grace to
Right.
grow,
Right.
grace to evolve. And like you said, when we transform for the better, it's phenomenal. Look at, like you said, look at Dr. King, look at Malcolm X, and there's been other people that we could cite who transform and evolved for the better. And I agree with you, Doc, that we should be able to take a look at that, examine that, and take lessons from that to
Right.
pass on, to the next generation. I couldn't agree with you more. Another thing, though, Doc, that I just like, and we're going to get into W.E.B. Dubois and Booker
Okay.
T,
Mhm.
is when people have views and opinions, they spew their views and opinions, and they haven't done the research. So they'll say, "Oh, when I first put your video out, and
Mhm.
some folks, the naysayer, oh, he wasn't a Pan Africanist. How could you say it?" And I said, "Well, brother, sister, did you read the 15 volumes of his handwritten notes, 300 pages per volume, before you spewed your views and opinions? I'm just curious. Did you do the and it was crickets. So we have these views. We spew a lot of views and opinions on topics that we haven't thoroughly researched. So people think today that they're experts in something because they watch a YouTube video, or
Right.
or or because Doc, they Google something.
Right.
You get what I'm
Right.
saying? And now they've
Right.
become the expert, Doc.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I totally agree with that. And it's just, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you're always going to have people who reject knowledge and information because it's like very a religious thing for them almost, right? They support this one and not that one. And that's fine, but what I guess for me as an educator, I'm obligated to share really not to turn around uh folks older than me and who are set in a way, but for young people to know, because this is also um, the information in here is also giving us strategies and tactics on how to do things for African people, right? Like, what can we do? How do we, as African people in the United States, pressure the US government to be just in terms of their policies in relationship to African nations? How did we did that? And how did we do that? Right? How do we leverage our power as African people in the United States in order to preserve an African nation?
Mm.
It's been done. How was that done? This tells you, the Liberian crisis tells you, okay? One of the things that Washington does in the context of the Liberian crisis is, and it challenges everything what people think they knew about him. But of course, this is going on behind the scenes, right? Privately, documented, because this is all in writing, but privately. He's not, these are diplomatic kind of interactions. So nobody's on the blowhorn telling what they did, but it's all there. It's there. It's been there for over 100 years. You can go find it in your library if they have a Washington collection. But the point is that in the Liberian crisis, one of the things that Booker T. Washington does is he writes to Theodore Roosevelt and he says, remember, now he's advisor to Roosevelt, and he says to him, well, remember, whatever you do or fail to do on behalf of Liberia, the 4 million Negroes in this country will remember it at voting time.
Mm.
So here you have someone who, in the public realm, people are saying, oh, he doesn't care about political rights and this, that, and the other, but he's leveraging the Black vote in his intimate conversations with a standing president who knows he wants his successor, Taft, to come in his place, okay, and be able to not pass the presidency, but ensure another Republican president will, be in office. And so, like, that's not a person who doesn't believe in voting. That's somebody who is like really a staunch negotiator. He's leveraging political power of Black people within the United States for the purpose and the benefit of securing an African nation on the continent, one of only 2 African nations that is uncolonized at the time. And so very interesting thing. But how do we advocate? One of some of the research I was reading at the time when I was writing and researching the book was a lot of research on African, so-called American participation and role in influencing U.S. policy on Africa, right?
Mm.
And how do we leverage our power within this country to the benefit of African people internationally? So that would fall into that realm, and it gives us a model. What has been done? What can we use? Every educator knows that you don't want to start from scratch. You want to build on what's already there.
That's right. We're not going to we don't reinvent the wheel if we don't have to.
And then you take it forward. So these become models for us in terms of negotiations on behalf of African people and to our benefit internally, internationally, around policy, around legislation. And then, of course, you see with the African exclusion measure, once again, Washington is challenging U.S. politicians to throw out a legislation that is overtly racist and would threaten to lock out anybody of the African or Black race from the United States forever, right? So, but the point about this whole book is just this transformation. There is a low point, and like, come on, people, what is a good epic story made of? This is not fictional. This is a factual story, but there's got to be a low. Hello, right? And that low is something that some people are limited to researching, which is the Togo. But what's the high? The high is the Liberian crisis and the African exclusion measure. and not to be facetious, some of it, the African exclusion is some of the reason why some of these folks who won't read this book can sit within the U.S. and talk about how they're not going to read this book.
Come on.
Okay.
Come on. Come on, Doc. Come on. Come on.
So, it's all good. But anyway, listen, when as a historian, I always see, when you go back and you correct history, which I've done before in another context, you always, for me, on a spiritual level, you see it as sacred work, because of course that ancestor, specifically if it's an individual person, that you're called to do that work. You're called to bring justice to a certain issue and bring truth to it. So this is not the first time that I've worked on something where I had to correct the historical record, and the correction made a major shift in how a story had been told. One of the times I was working, my first job out of undergrad in the field of history, I was working at a historic site, and there was a cemetery on the site, documents. It was a very old Revolutionary War era site. Bottom line is, the records there corresponded with the cemetery, and there was an African cemetery in the back. A African couple was throughout the records, and for years, the story was told about how the largest enslaver in that community gave this couple a homestead and $750, and how gracious this their former enslaver was. And then one day I found, I was digging a little bit more into the records, and I decided just to look at the interment records, and the person is also, and his wife and children are buried there. I
Wow.
looked at the interment records, and then I saw next to his name, Revolutionary War soldier. And I was like, So then I looked at some other corroborating documents, and once again, I saw next to his name, Revolutionary War soldier. So that meant that the story was different. This wasn't, just like an African person in his community who, after many years of being enslaved, the gracious wife of their original enslaver or their slaveholder gives them $750. The story really read like this. At 17 or 18 years old, this man who was enslaved and already has a wife in the community goes off and fights in the American Revolution and helps liberate these folks, these colonial folks, these British peasant class that are fighting against the aristocracy, the British aristocracy, goes and fights their war and comes back to this community. Why? Because many people took that war as an opportunity to flee and to leave, right? To run away and take their freedom. But he comes back to community because he has a wife already and children already. And he comes back to that community and remains enslaved for 47 years, him and his wife, after fighting in a war that would liberate the very people who are enslaving him. And so
Wow.
he and his wife are both still enslaved. And at around 72 years old is when they get this homestead. See how one piece of information can just like shift the story?
And
Here's
so
the
and
man
so
who,
and so this homestead came from the white dude. He actually fought the war on behalf of him.
well, okay, from the wife. So the Franklin. So it was the Franklin family, and this is in
Mm.
old Eastchester. This is Eastchester, present day Mount Vernon, New York. But the homestead was just pretty much a shack that they gave them and $750. But listen, after you fought in a war, you come back, you remain enslaved for 47 years, and you're 72 when you get your freedom. Your whole life, your whole life. Are you serious? That's not an act of graciousness. The wretchedness,
Mm.
okay, of keeping someone enslaved for 40 something years after they fought in a war that liberated your behind. I mean, so see, these are the things I get emotional about, not like fighting over, personality code, but um, so just that piece of information. And as soon as I found out, right, and I corroborated it, uh, I incorporated into my teaching, which that was my job to teach, Mount Vernon students local and Revolutionary War ever history. And now I incorporated this African man story. And then they got mad because they said, "Oh, this is not an African American site." But my point was this: I knew the moment that I found that piece of information that would change the whole story that they had been reciting over his head, over all of their hair, because it's a cemetery there. And part of what I did was take children through the cemetery, and we know where these individuals are buried and all of that. But
Beautiful.
can you imagine walking over all of these ancestors repeating a lie, right? That how gracious their enslavers were, you know. And so I knew the moment I found that information, my work was done and I would be out of there. So
Right,
partially because
absolutely.
they're like, get her out of here. But
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. And
right.
I'm glad that that you shared that story, because that's just one of many examples of how they, whitewash and distort history.
Oh
And
yeah.
then we just repeat it and teach it and repeat it and teach it and repeat it, and it just becomes the truth,
Right.
right?
Right.
Until
Right.
until someone like yourself comes along and say, well, let's examine this
Right.
for a little bit. Let's examine this, and then and let's revisit this, or let's correct this, right?
Right. Right.
And so I do appreciate that, Doc. Thank you so much. But I want to get into
Okay.
the whole W.E.B. Dubois and Booker T. Washington relationship. Can you describe the true nature of the relationship between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois? Were they arch enemies, as
No.
right liberal historians would have us believe, or were these just two men who were friends who just had ideological differences?
Well, see, that's just the thing, and that's a good question. I would consider it. I would consider the relationship more a mentor mentee relationship, first of all, because they're contemporaries, but they're not cohorts, right? They're not the same age. And
Mm.
they're very different, right? In their reality. And they're very different in their ideation, in the sense that, Du Bois is born in the North. He's not enslaved. And my that's my cat, the whole cat banging on the door. Um, he's not enslaved. He does not know what it is to be enslaved, although he is not he doesn't have the most, the best circumstances, which if people know about Du Bois and, his reality, his father leaves them and his mother dies by the time he's about 8. I mean, by the time he's in 8th grade, so he's about 12 or 13. Um, so he's really sort of like a charge to the community. But I don't know if I should pause and correct that. But anyway, but the thing with Washington, he is born in enslavement, okay, and he is aware of that. He is 9 when he is emancipated, and he recalls that. And if you read my book or anything, regarding Washington, up from slavery or anything, he tells you how he uh, acquires his name Washington, right, out of necessity. He just adopts the name. Now it was his stepfather's name, but he decides to take on the name because he was born enslaved. And even knowing one's birthday is a stretch, right? Because you're property. So two very different world views, and
Right.
to begin with. So the what I do with the book is that I give you, because see, I don't like conjecture, right? It's either fact or fiction. So right. And so I give you the first couple of letters that Du Bois writes Booker T. Washington in this book. Okay. And the reviewers of the book were saying to me initially, like, you shouldn't have too many block quotes. But I was like, listen, this is a special situation. Folks need to see Booker T. Washington and Du Bois's words directly from them, not me interpret. I'll get to the interpreting what it means, but they need to see what they were actually saying to each other. So in the chapter on Booker T. Washington, chapter 2, matter of fact, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist, I give you Du Bois' first letter to Booker T. Washington. And many people don't even know how they know each other. Well, they know each other because Du Bois went to Fisk. Booker T. Washington's wife, third wife, Margaret Murray Washington, went to Fisk. And they were acquainted with each other. Not the best of friends, but after Washington dies, he maintains a relationship with her because they do become friends in this 9 years that they are on good terms, or 9 years before The Souls of Black Folks comes out. And how do I get this 9 years? I'll tell you, because the first letter Du Bois ever writes to Washington is in this book. And it tells you where to go if you want to look at the letter yourself. It's in the Booker T. Washington papers, of course. Okay. Volume 3, page 459, if you want to go and look at the document yourself. But this is the first letter Du Bois writes to Washington. He says, President Washington, sir, may I ask if you have a vacancy for a teacher in your institution next year? I am a Fisk and Harvard man and have just returned from 2 years abroad as scholar of the John F. Slater Trustees. My specialty is history and social science, but I can teach German, philosophy, natural science, classics. Your wife knows of me, and I refer by permission to President Gilman, Johns Hopkins University. That is Du Bois writing to Booker T. Washington on July 27th, 1894. Wow. And he's asking him for a job, obviously, right?
Right.
He tells him how he knows him. I know you're a wife, right? I'm a Fisk and a Harvard man. And he is asking for, it's not the first time. He would write on a number of occasions asking Washington for a job at Tuskegee. Now, let's dispel one, ongoing misconception. Tuskegee was a vocational school. No, it was not. It was, the charter says, the Negro Normal School for Teachers at Tuskegee. In the chapter where I break down Tuskegee and the Tuskegee model, I give you the first curriculum. And in that curriculum, it has what? Pedagogy, but it also has history. Du Bois would have known that because, of course, he tells you, if this is a vocational school, why are you offering to teach? My specialty is history and social science, but I can teach German, philosophy, natural science, classics. Your skills are irrelevant at a vocational school. But he knew that Tuskegee was not a vocational school. He knew Tuskegee taught the discipline of history. And when you get the book, you will see there's a picture of a history class there at Tuskegee. So this has always been a part of the curriculum because it is a school for teachers that teaches the academics and then gives you the option to perfect 2 trades to the level of teaching it to someone else, right? which is also why they're studying pedagogy, because they're not just learning, they are too teachers. They will teach others, and they're encouraged to do that because there is a whole, not to go get into the whole Tuskegee thing, but there is a specific Tuskegee mission that is underway there. Okay, so that is the responsibility of each of them. And if anybody wants to know more about that, they can go read Washington's book called Character Building, what he's talking to them about in the chapel every Sunday. He's not talking about religious ideology, because I know a sister who's an alumni. She has said, "Oh, you said Washington wasn't religious." Listen, it's not my opinion about whether he's a religious or not. If you have a chapel on your campus and every Sunday you're not talking about religion, but instead you're talking about character, I think that it says everything you need to know about the person, what they value, because we all know the role of religion in the Black community, right? So if you have a chapel and you have a place to espouse religious ideology, but you're talking about character building, which in terms of culture, talking about character and building character is distinctively African, first of all. Okay?
Facts. That's facts.
Distinctively African. However, Washington compiled all his lectures on character and character building into one book called Character Building. YouTube, you can get the audio book on YouTube and listen to it for free until infinitum. Like if you want to do that. That being said, so this is not about conjecture. This is like fact. So Washington is communicating with Dubois for 9 years. They have an ongoing relationship. Okay. Dubois seeks counsel in Washington. He comes and he's at Tuskegee on numerous occasions. On another occasion, the second letter that he writes to Washington, I put in here because for the naysayers, and it's not even for the naysayers. My thing is this. Let me put the evidence in your hand.
Come on, Doc.
Right? Like, it's not even about the naysayers. It's like, here's the evidence, because this belongs to us. Like, we should know this. This should be common knowledge, so that when white liberals from academia come and tell you about our leadership and what their relationships were to each other and what they believe, you can correct them. Okay. I mean, I see this Du Bois and Washington thing very much like how I see jazz and other things being absorbed by Western culture and the academy, right? So in other words, just to give an example, Miles Davis would always say, "I don't play jazz. I don't even say jazz." They'll say, "What'd you call it?" He says, "Social music." That's what white people decided to call our genre, this art form that we engage in. This is our social music. So my point is this: he who defines controls. We are the ones who need to have the last word on our folks, our relationships to each other, and all of that. But unfortunately, it has been hijacked and then institutionalized, right? So these things exist in institutions now. And there's about 100-year history affirming this Du Bois-Washington conflict, to the point that when in 1860, a little bit before 1863, when Du Bois writes that there's not much difference between him and Washington after all, nobody notices it, even coming from him, So it's unfortunate. I want to stop that noise in the
Go ahead, Doc. Go ahead. You're fine.
Okay, you got to cut this out.
No. We're live, Doc, so I won't be cutting it. But I know the people, you already told us that it's the cat that is knocking on the door. She has a cat family who keeps banging on the door. So she's like, let me go ahead and correct that. It was
right. Yeah, because they just like, they're going to...
It's okay, Doc.
They're going to tear the door down. All right.
It happens. But this was getting juicy. So you said that Du Bois I say Dubois or Du Bois.
Du Bois.
He wrote Booker T. Washington and said to him that there was really no difference. Is that what you said?
Well, no, Washington is dead, and Du
Okay.
Bois
Well,
writes in the public realm, probably in the
oh, okay.
crisis. I
Okay.
have the article somewhere
Okay.
because
Okay.
there
So,
really wasn't much difference between him and Washington.
mm,
And that after all. But let's be very clear. I want to hone in on something very specific
okay.
because this conflict between Du Bois and Washington, smoke and mirrors. This is what actually happens. And there's a book where you can read Du Bois' own words in terms of, besides my book, where you can read his own words about what happened between him and Booker T. Washington. There's a collection of essays in a book called, let me see, what's this called? Booker T. Washington and His Critics, The Problem of Negro Leadership. Okay, well, you can't see it because this is a library copy. It's a collection of essays, and it's by Amherst College and edited by Hugh Hawkins. And there's an essay in there written by Du Bois where he admits what his real issue was with Washington.
Mm,
And it was the Tuskegee machine. So here's the setting. They have a 9-year relationship. 1894, he contacts Washington. Of course, Washington invites him to Tuskegee. They have communication for years, on and off, not on and off, but consistently. They have a relationship. Washington is the one who is involved with getting Du Bois to go to plenary meetings. So Professor Small is correct about that. But he learns that from my book because I'm actually so mostly what he's saying to you about that is from this book. It's in this book. The point is that Washington and Du Bois are both attending the plenary sessions for the first Pan-African Conference. They are on good terms, and they have no reason not to be on good terms. Let me just give you more evidence of that. In the book, there's a second letter right before before Du Bois goes off to UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, to do the famous study of the Philadelphia Negro, right? The first scientific study
mm,
of the African population in the United States. Um, so he writes Booker T. Washington to get support for that 1 year because he only has a 1 year stint at Penn, right? White racist institution. They're only going to let him have a 1 year fellowship or whatever he was on. And this is what he writes to Booker T. Washington because he's trying to make his plans for after that, right? That 1 year. So he says, "Dear Mr. Washington, I feel that I should like to work at Tuskegee if I could be of service to you. My idea has been that there might gradually be developed there a school of Negro history and social investigation which might serve to help place more and more the Negro problem on a basis of sober fact. I think that in time, various colleges like Harvard, Chicago, John Hopkins, and the UPenn would join in supporting such a movement. What do you think? At the present, I know just how I could be of service. I can teach most primary and secondary branches, preferring, of course, history, economics, social problems. I have had an indication that I may expect an offer from the University of Pennsylvania for a year, after which, if needed, I could come to Tuskegee, perhaps have the active aid of a great college like the University of Pennsylvania. In any case, I am willing and eager to entertain any proposition for giving my services to your school." That is Du Bois, Booker T. Washington Papers, Volume 3, page 456 to 461. You
Mm.
can find that letter from Dubois. That
Wow.
being said, so you hear what he's saying. He's already thinking about doing the study on the Philadelphia Negro, right? But he's going to go to UPenn to do it, and he does it, and then he's planning for after that. And he wants to establish on a more sober and scientific level the study of the African population and an experience, so on and so forth. And he's seeking to do that even at Tuskegee, right? He says, I could come to Tuskegee, perhaps have the active aid of a great college like University of Pennsylvania. He's delusional as far as that's concerned, but okay. Right? Because they don't care nothing about, like, they treated him like trash at Penn. That's well documented. But the point is that he he's coming to Tuskegee. Now, are you coming to a vocational and industrial school to do a scientific study of the Negro? No, why would you? There would be no place for you. Okay. Totally different realm, right? But he knows Tuskegee is a school for teachers. He knows that Tuskegee is what it is, right? An academic school that produce more college educated blacks than manual laborers.
Mm.
Period. Okay. Um, that being said, they are in relationship with each other. Du Bois is coming to Tuskegee on occasion, spending summers in Tuskegee. We can place him on the campus. The only reason why I do not say that Du Bois taught a course at Tuskegee is because I was never able to locate a syllabus. And behind the scenes, if I could have, somebody might have stole it, because that would have been a great piece of evidence to debunk and dispel what people were thinking, or had been led to think. That being said, here is their real conflict. After years of interacting, Du Bois coming to Tuskegee, staying at Booker T. Washington's house, finally comes the summer of 1903. There is a riot in Boston. That same summer, Du Bois spent much of the summer at Tuskegee. We can put him on the campus. See, this is the great thing about research, because you can document when people in those days are writing to and from somewhere, they're saying where they're at. Their address, the return address is where they're writing from. You understand? Not like today. We post pictures and we're already on another continent, but we showing you pictures of when we were in Africa. No, you're home in New York or whatever. But so it wasn't like that. He is writing from Tuskegee. He is in Tuskegee. And when he stays at Tuskegee, he stays at Booker T. Washington's house with his family. He has a relationship with his wife, clearly, right? And would have a relationship with Booker T. Washington's wife, Margaret Murray Washington, even after Booker T. Washington is long gone. That being said, the summer of 1903, the riots take place. After staying at Washington's house during that summer, Du Bois goes to Boston and he coalesces with Monroe Trotter. Monroe Trotter is one of Washington's most public critics. He has his own paper. He is not owned by Washington, and Washington has significant control of the Black press. So, in other words, he's controlling all the Black media outlets. Think of it in that way. And so, what happens is of course, Booker T. Washington knows that Du Bois has gone to Boston, because he sees it in a paper where Du Bois uh, sort of praises Trotter, not for being involved in the riots, because he was not involved in the riots, but for how he handled the riots in terms of being Black leadership in that community at that time. So, how he addressed the community post the riots. Booker T. Washington felt offended by that. You stay at my house, you here with my family, you eat my food, you coalesce with my children, and then you go to my arch enemy and publicly praise him. That was Booker T. Washington's chief issue with Du Bois. But it wasn't enough for him to totally turn his back on him. And this is the thing, it's so crazy because, you know, you could find all of this out. I'm not controlling any of this. These are in very old books. These books called the 15 volumes of the Booker T. Washington papers. The books are older than me. Okay? So meaning that this has been preserved even prior to my existence, if anybody wanted to know. That being said, you can see Washington over the years. Of course, he's annoyed and perturbed at Du Bois over that key issue right there. But it's not enough to never have anything to do with him. It's not enough for him to just to malign him or anything like that. But here's Du Bois's issue. And Du Bois, interestingly enough, just like we are not reading Booker T. Washington's primary correspondence and the primary evidence there around Washington, we are not reading what Du Bois wrote. Because here's in this book an essay, which I reference in my book, where Du Bois tells you what his real issue with Booker T. Washington was and how he came to write Souls of Black Folks. He tells you that his chief issue with Booker T. Washington was none other than the Tuskegee machine. The Tuskegee machine was Booker T. Washington's secret network that you will hear about in the final case in this book to challenge the African exclusion measure. It is a network of power brokers that Booker T. Washington had that he would send out to do all kinds of things. And very often, one of the things Washington would do is activate his network to silence people in the public realm who did not agree with whatever he was doing or was up to. So, and that's whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that was the power that he had. Du Bois was angry about that because Du Bois witnessed him silencing people. Okay, we know that Booker T. Washington had significant control over not just the Black press, but appointments to public positions. People would call him, and if you got a recommendation from Mr. Washington, then you got the job, right? He undermined, and this is the part where people don't get. I'm not trying to make Booker T. Washington look like a saint. He's up to all kinds of things. He is a very rare and unusual individual. He does the kind of politicking that most of us can't even imagine. Okay? That being said, Du Bois is in his presence and is aware and understands that this man has this level of power, and he does not like it because the people that Washington can silence are his peers, are his cohorts. Okay, and he tells you this much. So when given the opportunity to publish the Souls of Black Folks, Du Bois tells you how he puts it together. He says he put together a few fugitive pieces, and I'm using his own words. And all of us as scholars know that you may write something and then you don't use it, or you might write something else and you don't use it. And then he got an opportunity to essentially take all of these essays that he had written and put them together. And then he wrote that one chapter of Booker T. Washington, of Mr. Booker T. Washington. Okay. He chooses, And he says this, and I'll read straight from it, but he chooses to talk about this pseudo conflict and difference in program for Black people instead of his real grievance. He writes that himself. And why? He didn't want to talk about his personal issue with Washington. It was just that, his personal issue. He constructed this other pseudo issue because, and why do I say it's a pseudo issue? He knows the school is not a vocational industrial school. It has 44 industries, sure, because Tuskegee is a sustainable community. And Washington has perfected that. But the people he's producing are not simply vocational and industrial laborers. Everybody knows that. It's almost something that people don't have to say because it's an understanding in that instance. That being said, Dubois, he may have felt certain things and it felt like, this guy doesn't want to push for social and political rights or whatever the case may be. However, he knows that he can make a case basically on this pseudo argument as opposed to airing out his true personal generational conflict that he has with him. And that's really what it is. A very young man, which Dubois is, and an older man who has power that the young man resents, and reasonably so. We see this all the time. This still goes on in our community. However, he was loyal enough that he did not want to air out his personal issue with Washington, and he instead constructs this vocational versus industrial, vocational versus intellectual and scholarly challenge to white supremacy and culture, right? So, and it's really just simple as that. Okay, he knows that he's doing that. He says it, and so let me go right to the sources, right?
Okay.
So, on page 20 of the book, of my book, I'm going to quote it, and then I'm going to go to the original essay that Dubois wrote himself, right? So in the latter part of 1903, Dubois' well-known critical piece on Washington contained in the souls of Black folks became public and exposed the apparent break between them. The book challenged Washington's agenda and criticized his failure to participate in the demand for social and political equality in the U.S. However, Dubois later wrote a more honest essay titled My Early Relations with Booker T. Washington, which is in this book, that essay, okay, that I'm going to go to in a second. So in this more honest essay called My Early Relations with Booker T. Washington, which detailed the real issues that divided them, Du Bois confirmed the source of their conflict was not opposing programs for the African American population in the U.S. It was Washington's use and abuse of his secret network, the Tuskegee machine. Du Bois accused Washington of silencing any opposing views that could possibly appear in the press.
Wow.
So, The Souls of Black Folks, which was published shortly after Du Bois' interviews with Washington for a position at Tuskegee, and right after they both attended the plenary sessions for the Unified Program for the Negro in America, offered philosophical explanation for the rift between the two men. The Souls of Black Folks articulated the opposing philosophies and gave life to the public discourse around conflicting programs for African Americans at the time. The details of their relationship and Du Bois' subsequent disenchantment with Washington would affect the vein in which he discussed Washington in the book. However, Du Bois admitted that the book was comprised, meaning souls of black folks, of a few fugitive pieces, and to that he included the chapter titled Of Mr. Booker T. Washington and Others, to which he sought to make a frank evaluation of Booker T. Washington. He left out the more controversial matter, the bitter resentment which Negroes felt at the continued and increasing activity of the Tuskegee machine. Period. If you notice, I see you reading along. That's in quotes, right?
Absolutely.
Why? Because it comes from this book that is where this essay is called My Early Relations with Booker T. Washington. And it's from the book In an Autobiography of Race Concepts. So, anyway, I have the book right here, and it goes into it extensively. And you can find the essay. I'm pretty sure. Let me see. I don't know where you can find the essay because it's a super old book. But you know, if you really committed, you could find it. This book was published in 1962. This is the internal. I don't know if you can see that. The internal title there. But basically, Dubois, and I'll read just a little bit of where that came from. Let me see. And he talks about this essay right here, My Early Relations with Booker T. Washington. He talks all about his personal, feelings about education and all of that. And the fact that he believed in the talented 10th. Okay, so
Doc, let me just interject because brother Tiwolo, he just asked a really good question.
Yes.
So he said, well, was he a gatekeeper? So
who
was Booker T. Washington? Was W.E.B. Dubois trying to imply that Booker T was like some sort of gatekeeper? You know, in a sense that, okay, he has this Tuskegee machine that silences opposing views. So is that the perception that he was trying to, he was trying to paint him as some sort of gatekeeper?
Well, yeah. I mean, he I think that, so let me just be very specific about something. I'm an expert on Washington and his role in Africa. By proximity to the issue, I develop in-depth knowledge about this and other things related to what he's up to in America, right? However, I mean, you can find me anywhere, and I will say it here. I don't defend it. Booker T. Washington is up to all kinds of things. He is. I mean, the man, see, this is the difference. And this is going to sound very, funny to hear, but, I'm going to be explicit. We know about people being ruthless in history. But for us African people, we generally, particularly in our experience in the Western Hemisphere, we know about people being ruthless to us. We don't know about people being ruthless for us. He was ruthless for us, okay? Because and there's great irony in the fact that this was Du Bois's real issue with Washington. You know why? Because this Tuskegee machine would be the vehicle through which he destroys the African exclusion measure. Okay? Du Bois does not have that measure of power. Trotter does not have that measure of power. None of his critics have that measure of power. It is that measure of power that would, in this instance, separate the men from the boys. When the U.S. government, so the question here is like, Washington is using the Tuskegee machine to advance what he feels is best for the collective. Now the question is like, you should have probably been more democratic about it. But this is not a fate. This is not an above ground entity. This is a secret entity, first of all, right? This is a below ground entity. This is not something, like I said in our last conversation, some of the members of some of the lieutenants in the Tuskegee machine are people, and I actually pulled the actual documents because I was sort of preparing for this. But some of the people who are involved in the Tuskegee machine, who are lieutenants in the secret network, are people who publicly, the public thinks are enemies and critics of Washington. But they are not. Namely, someone named Francis Grimke. Okay? This is a man who actually looks like, in the public realm, a critic, an adversary of Booker T. Washington. But in the Booker T. Washington papers, you see that Grimke and Booker T. Washington are aligned, and you see them maneuvering in challenging the African exclusion measure. So what I'm saying to you about Booker T. Washington, first of all, is that he rarely showed his face in the public realm. You could not base who he was on what he showed in public. Okay? It was a different time, first of all. But also, too, he was a shrewd enough and smart enough. Who knew someone born in slavery could be up to all of this, negotiating the fate of an African nation, challenging the U.S. government. So in other words, he uses his Tuskegee machine against the U.S. government and its politicians in order to get what he wants for who? African people, not just the ones in this country, but for those outside, primarily in that case. Okay? So, yes, one could interpret it that Dubois was perturbed that Washington was a gatekeeper. But to be quite frank with you, see, I don't do this either or kind of thing, Du Bois or Washington kind of thing, because I know that it's much more complicated than that. But I will say that Du Bois, what looked like his public position wasn't anything better, right? And let's be very clear. If we were to assess whose pseudo program produced anything for us, neither was implemented. And Du Bois's program almost certainly does not benefit us today, okay? Because we think that Black presence, symbolic Black presence, does something for us. No, it doesn't. It doesn't, and we make this we have this conversation a lot in the Black community. Well, just by being there, that advances us. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because the condition of you being there is that you can't do anything. Everybody else from their group, they're there and they are doing. They're in action. They're in motion for their constituents and their people. The condition of your Black presence is that you will not do anything for us. That's why, let me just give you the iconic example of this. Obama. Okay? 2 days after Obama is elected, I won't say the elder scholar's name. I had lunch with an elder who says to me, well, you must admit that this is some kind of progress. This is some kind of progress. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not willing to admit that. Day two, no way. I said, right. I said, absolutely not. So I said, no. I said, let me just tell you something. The condition, I said, is definitely a different part of the game. Definitely a different part of the game. However, the condition of his presidency, unlike the condition of the other presidents before him, will be that he cannot serve Black people. If I were to look, because I'm somebody who studies policy, if I were to look at the legislation that Obama enacted on behalf of African people and Black people in this country, which there were many opportunities to do that, okay, especially by executive order. And now that, and when I would say that, people say, oh, he can't. Okay, but you just saw Biden and other people just do that, right? Because they can. Anyway, that being said, you will know that that presidency produced nothing for us in terms of legislation. And how do you judge a legislator, a politician? By the legislation they produce.
Come on. Come on.
You don't weigh and measure them by if you like their hair or their suit or their wife. Okay? You weigh and measure by the legislation they produce. And so I'm still waiting on that legislation that would protect our very lives under that administration. It never came. That being said, if you want to protect anything, that's certainly something to protect.
That's right.
That being said, I said to this elder scholar, I said, no, it's like Dr. Clark said, we're always ready to have the victory, claim the victory without weighing and measuring the victory. I said, for me, I want to qualify what he does, period. Okay. And so we have gotten involved in this whole thing where we think Black presence means something. And that really is sort of reminiscent of the talented 10th kind of thing. Like, I'm here. I mean, just me being here means something. No, it don't if you don't do nothing for us. Okay? It's no currency for us if you just there in, Black presence. It does not mean Black progress. People who
hold on, Doc. Hold on. I'm sorry. I had some static in my headphones. when you said that, I had some static. Something was going on. You said Black presence. Can you repeat that?
Black presence does not mean Black progress.
Okay.
It does not. Okay. So a people who need so much on a material and real level, okay, cannot settle for symbolism and simply presence. And the condition, I don't care what job you're on, honestly, the condition for most of us in Western institutions is that you will not serve your own people. Black people will not benefit. That's why a Kamala Harris can be running for president and say, I won't do anything only for Black people.
That's what she said.
Yes, and be okay with that. Okay? And then turn around and be vice president to somebody who made an act, right? The Asian Hate Act, right? Only for one particular group of people. Really? How does that work?
Come on, Doc.
You should have protested that immediately because she's not about doing nothing only for one group of people. Are you serious? Well, we were the only ones who were enslaved here. So there should be a specific set of legislation to deal with our perpetual condition that is legacy of slavery, which we only experience. Only we experience that. So my point is that, not to get off on a tangent, Dubois or Washington's plan has not been implemented. However, every time those of us who say we're not, they're not into the Booker T. Washington thing, and you don't have to be into Booker T. Washington, but I bet you'd be talking about how you about to boycott the corner store or this, that, and the other. The economic approach, that's Washington. That's him. The independence through industry, the Black business path, the entrepreneurship, that's Booker T. Washington. Okay, the Negro Business League. That's Booker T. Washington. We still doing that. I don't hear too much. I mean, listen, yes, we're still in high places doing nothing for the masses, doing nothing for people right in front of us, and know that the condition of our presence there is that we can't. For people in this country when Obama got elected to overwhelmingly, we didn't have a Black meeting, but every Black person, as soon as you said, well, he needs to do this, he can't. How we all know that? Because we know the unspoken terms here. right? The unspoken condition. When George W. Bush went to, I would think it was a correspondence meeting or something like that, he comes to this meeting and he speaks to all these white, particularly male, 1%, right? Corporate owners and founders in this country. He says, I am here to speak to my base. If you know anything about the war, the politics of war in this country, he bankrupted this country almost, serving his base. He took the money out of the people's pockets and gave a blank check to involve themselves in the Afghanistan and Iraqi wars, right? But guess where that money went to? American corporations.
Absolutely.
Right. It went out of the taxpayers' pocket into corporate America and into the pocket of his friends. Period. That's the politics of war. Okay. And anyway, W. Bush, he was so rowdy. Just to be honest, the guy was a rowdy individual. When he couldn't get people, enough nations to get involved in the coalition of the willing, what did he say? If you don't join the coalition of the willing to go into Afghanistan, you won't get no contracts. Just straight up. Okay. When we go into the coffers of this country and take their resources to build up this country that we just leveled, you won't get no government contracts from us. So his point being is that that's the politics of war. My point of saying all of that is that that's what people do for their constituents. All kinds of things when they're in position of powers. Go into whole countries, tear them down, build them up, and put money in your pocket. But the condition for every Black person, and I know there's some of us who are still romanticizing about it, because we think we're in white institutions doing something, thinking like that whole talented temp thing.
Come on.
And it means something. No, it don't, because they'll march you right out of there and erase you. Those of us who are academicians, this is for y'all. See, we can be in these institutions, and if you don't do work for the people that you put in the community, which is why I put this book in the community, when you leave those institutions, you know what they do? Scrub you away. Okay? You could do all kinds of stuff in their archives, in their museums, here, there, everywhere, in the department, build it up, tear it down, break it up, and they will erase you when it's all over. Period.
That's a fact.
Okay? So my point of saying all of that is that what happens with Booker T. Washington and Du Bois is this. That conflict that Du Bois is willing to sweep under the rug and then create a pseudo conflict for, that pseudo conflict becomes embellished.
And the pseudo conflict, I want to be clear, is saying that they had different programs, when really the issue was he didn't like the Tuskegee machine, the power that Booker T. Washington wielded with the Tuskegee machine.
Yeah.
But but he used, like you said, the pseudo conflict was, we just have different programs. You said, when in actuality, you said that the programs weren't that different. Can you expound on that, Doc?
Well, they weren't that different in the sense that if Du Bois is asking Booker T. Washington, can I teach your school not one time, but 2 times and 3 times? And the guy knows that there's no real programmatic difference. He knows that Tuskegee has an academic path, and more than an academic path, an intellectual path there. I mean, people, and I said this last time when I was with you, people who study history, historians know what history is about. It's a study of power. Why are you studying history if you don't want to study power? Okay, it's a study of power. It's about studying the movement of power over time. And so Du Bois knows what that's about. I mean, he knows that. Why are you asking the man for a job to teach him? What are you going to teach? Wheel writing? Mattress making? No, because you don't know anything about those things. You want to talk about putting the study of the Negro experience more on a scientific level. And you think that you can do this at Tuskegee. Why? Because you know that it is more than an industrial and vocational school. And so get the essay if those of you can find it. But I give you the citations in my book, the essay, my personal relations with Booker T. Washington and others. We don't have, see, this is the thing about history. It's like Malcolm said, it's best qualified to reward all research. We don't have to speculate about this. This is why I don't care what people say, like, oh, you're defending Booker T. Washington. I don't care about defending people. Here's the historical record. You could put it in your own hands if you want to. I could just tell you where it's at. You can find yourself. We're so blessed to be able to do that, but then people don't want to get with the work. Do you get what I'm saying? And we need to stop allowing other people to define the legacy and the relationships that we have with each other. And because we can't truly get the lessons out of those things, okay? When other people are interpreting what's going on, they don't understand what's going on with us and our people or nothing like that. Do you get what I'm saying? Nobody would understand how, I mean, I understand it, but nobody would understand how Booker T. Washington is long gone, but Du Bois and Margaret Murray Washington are still friends. That's on the record. You can look in the papers and find correspondence between the two of them for years after Booker T. Washington is gone. Were they really those arch enemies? Not really. But what happens is that you have white scholars who detect a public break or conflict and take it and give it a life of its own. So once that book comes out in 1903, it takes on a life of its own. Have you ever had a conflict with a person and it's not that big, but then all these other folks become involved with it and now they have an invested interest in it? Okay, and you like, whoa, wait a minute, my thing with this person ain't even that big, but y'all are invested in our conflict for various reasons. And in the academy, it takes on a life of its own. Okay, that's part of the reason why in the preface I break all of this down. There is a series, we can document who it is. There are a series, a number of scholars who take up this occupation of embellishing and building on this pseudo conflict. Even if you go on YouTube, you can find these old little poems that people did about W.E.B. and Booker T. See, that didn't come from them, okay? But the idea is that, so it's very divisive politics. And if I had to blame anyone for it, I would blame scholars, particularly of the non-African persuasion, who have written, there's another scholar who talked about this, 100-year history on this conflict. Okay? One of the two parties being dead for most of the time, and that being Washington. Okay? And even Du Bois, he's haunted by Washington because don't get me wrong. Let's be very clear. Du Bois is seething with regard to Washington. Washington is not. You can see in the Booker T. Washington papers at the end of Washington's life, he is having private conversations about Du Bois like, hey, I wish this guy would stop. And you can see even in the case of the African exclusion measure, where someone who knows both of them says, oh man, this is great. We're all aligned against the African exclusion measure. Speaking of Du Bois, speaking of others who are public critics of Washington. However, no, Du Bois and the others are not able to throw the impact what happens with the measure. Washington is, and thank goodness, thank the ancestors, because some folks, their whole reality would be quite different. Okay,
absolutely.
Right. So, but they are aligned on those issues. So you can see over time in the papers, in Washington's personal papers, from time to time, he'll talk about people like, one time this man, his whole, whole platform was criticizing me. And then when, X, Y, and Z happened, he had no platform because his whole platform was built around criticizing me, essentially, is what he's saying. And so he kind of is likening it, comparing it to Du Bois to a certain extent. So, in other words, I'm the antagonist to you. But really, what is your position if you don't have me? You're an antagonist. And I'm really, truly, probably what he wants to say is that he's not your antagonist because he supports him. He offers him a job after, I mean, every time Du Bois is asking for a job, Washington is responding in affirmative. It never materializes because something else always comes up. But Washington's not like, no. He's like, come on. Okay. He's staying at his house. They are involved in the plenary sessions of the first Pan-African Conference together. Okay. It leading up to 1894, leading up to 1900. So they have a 9-year relationship that is relatively positive. And another misconception, that Booker T. Washington does not show up at the first Pan-African Conference because Du Bois showed up. See, this is how, this is like, that's conjecture. Absolutely not. Okay? They're not even in conflict at that time. Now, am I saying that I don't think that, let me just be very clear. I think that Du Bois, a very young man, always had a problem with Booker T. Washington's power. But, period. I think he always did.
And you're saying we know that it wasn't his program because we have letters saying, hey, I want to teach at Tuskegee.
Right,
So you didn't have an issue, right? You didn't have an issue with, the program. But would you say, so you said both of their programs were more similar than different. But
there was no programmatic difference. Like, it's
okay.
not real. It's like, it's not real. Tuskegee has always been a school for teachers. What is, so the only thing he can say is that Washington's idea socially about how to advance our people is more of an economic approach.
Right, than a political
one.
Okay.
But then Washington will prove us all wrong behind the scenes in the Liberian crisis when he says to Theodore Roosevelt, whatever you do, and I'm quoting, or fail to do to preserve Liberia, remember, it will be noted by the 4 million Negroes at voting time. The audacity. Now, mind you, this is listen, so let me just go off on the side right here.
Go ahead, Doc.
Some of y'all don't talk to white folks like that today. So stop. Y'all don't talk to your boss like that. Okay? You don't tell them whatever you do or fail to do for Black people is going to be remembered. And you're going to pay for it when we get to cast our ballot or whatever. Y'all scared to talk like that on the job, in the street, wherever.
Online. Come on. Online. I get inbox messages from people.
Right.
You want to be careful what you say on your podcast and what you post on IG, because you are a university professor, so you don't want to you don't want to lose that. And I'm sitting here like, wow, what happened to the warrior spirit, right? Like, what happened to the warrior spirit? You profess to have this warrior spirit, but you're in my DMs and you're emailing me telling me to be careful of what I say in my podcast.
You're dealing with social and political and historical topics that are relevant to the Black community. Wow.
Come on.
See what I mean? Though, like, right. So you're not allowed to, so you can exist, right? Dr. Maat can be a face in this space, right? But if you take action, that's a no-no.
That's a
Because
no
we
no.
all know the condition to our presence in those spaces, those white
Absolutely.
institutional spaces. So, like that's what I always want to say to some folks when I have this conversation about Du Bois and Washington. Like, stop, you're not talking like that right now. You're not telling a perfect example. And as far as the money thing is concerned, yes, Booker T. Washington, I love him in that sense. He's the guy is ruthless behind the scenes. I mean, it's just a very rare, he's a whole case study in itself as in terms of a personality as a person, because there's a moment in time he's consistently tried to get monies, but for who? For us. Most of us are getting money for ourselves, not for institutions, for our own people that are exclusively for us. That's just a big difference. Do you get what I'm saying? Most of us
Oh,
are
I
not
absolutely, I
serving
absolutely, I absolutely
our
get what you're
people,
saying.
right? We hang our whole hat on. Well, I'm the only black face in the room. Okay, but then how's that currency for us? That don't do nothing for the rest of us over here. You get what I'm saying? But the point is that Washington, I saw in the personal papers, and I note this somewhere in the book, because just the level, the kind of conversations that he's having, lets you know that he is a person who is peculiar, who is ruthless for his people. That I just can't even state it any other kind of way. And to the contrary about Du Bois, Du Bois is I'm going to quote Kwame Nkrumah about Du Bois. As we know, Du Bois ends up in um, Ghana under the invitation of Kwame Nkrumah. And you know what Kwame Nkrumah says about Du Bois? He says he was a Pan Africanist, but he was not a revolutionary.
Woo!
Okay. And I didn't put it in my book. At one of the lectures that I did on this, I do talk about Nkrumah's documented um, position and opinion about Du Bois, someone he embraced. But I would say that that's relatively accurate. He
That's
was
what I
a
was sitting here thinking about. That's what I was thinking about. I was like, Doc, we need to really unpack that statement.
yeah,
Because when you think about it, you said he was a Pan Africanist,
yeah.
but he wasn't,
He
a
wasn't a revolutionary.
revolutionary. Right. Let's unpack that, Doc.
Well, because this is the thing. Think about what Du Bois say. Talent. Let's start. Because he goes through many stages and phases, right? Um, but he is primarily, and I teach this on an international level about Pan African history too. At this and counting, I'm up to somewhere around, I don't know, we're over 10,000 during the pandemic. I teach a ideological and training course on Pan African history and organizing for a black tech company. But that being said, um, part of what we look at and examine with regard to Du Bois is his strides that he made in terms of organization. He's an organization person, okay? He's an institution person, um, and he seeks to do that. Revolutionaries don't do that. Revolutionaries are into radical change. They will they want to tear it all down to build something new, not reform what exists or reform what's
Mm.
already corrupt. Okay, revolutionaries are usually establishment, true revolutionaries anyway, right? They don't care to participate in your hierarchy. And these are things that we see in terms of Du Bois' philosophical thought from the beginning, the Niagara movement, the talented 10th. He is into elitism, hierarchy, so the talented 10th, this idea that a small few are supposed to go into American society and then advance the interest of the masses and then pull them up. But what happens? These small few integrate into American society, but then they don't turn. They forgot. They don't look back. They don't look down. They don't look. You know what I'm saying? They don't serve anybody's interest but their own, and then sell you the idea that their presence alone does such makes such strides, and it is so progressive for us as a people. Really? Okay. All right. But and we can't eat that. We can't take that to the bank. So that's nonsense. But really, on a real level, right? So Du Bois is more that kind of person. I mean, he is a revolutionary in terms of what he's thinking that he can do with an organizational body. But in terms of a revolutionary action, meaning I could see why Nkrumah can say that, because Du Bois isn't the intellectual that would go to an African country and challenge the colonial regime and destroy it and be the leader of an independent African nation. He's not that guy. Okay. He's the person who is going to connect the struggles of African people, going to facilitate a think tank where we engage and get the ideological development and fortitude to go and do that work, possibly. But he is not the doer of that work. Okay. He is the thinker. Okay. And that's great. But that was Nkrumah's position on him. Nkrumah said he was a Pan-Africanist. Without a doubt, he was a Pan-Africanist. But he's not a revolutionary.
And Brother Kofi empowering us, he said even the Honorable Marcus Garvey recognized, he was not a revolutionary.
Right. Yeah. No. He was not a change agent. He was someone who, and that's why, we have to be very careful with the view of any given historical figure, particularly Du Bois, because he lives so long, right? And so he has a very, he almost lives to be 100. And where he begins and where he ends up is very different. Okay. So that's the biggest thing. Where he ends up in Africa, giving up his US citizenship because he's so disgruntled and so disenchanted with American society. And when is that around? It's right around the time that 1963. Right, he's dying right around the same time that what's happening? The Civil Rights Acts are being pushed. The March on Washington is, taking place. The Civil Rights Act 1964 and 1965 will come. But guess what? What we don't understand, or people don't really understand the story of power in this country as it relates to African people. Those acts should have provoked, and the push for those acts should have provoked Du Bois, because 60 plus 70 years before that, he's saying the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are written in our blood post the Civil War. We have the right to vote. We have the 14th Amendment, the equal protection under the law, and all of that. There's no need for anything else. Enforce that. 60, 70 years later, he wants to holler. He's ready to go crazy. You're pushing for legislation to stop them from violating your voting rights, which you got all the way back there in 1860s, in 1868, 1870s, as the Civil War Reconstruction Amendments. Of course he's upset. Of course he's, just over it. I don't blame him, right? To be quite frank with you, so we don't really understand what all of that means. Why do we need the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and 1965? Enforce the Reconstruction Amendments. Period. equal protection under the law in every area of life, full citizenship. You see, to protect the rights of white Americans or so called white Americans, there's no amendments to really the Constitution. It's just the Constitution itself.
That's a fact.
Yeah. But for us, there are these conditions, right? So these, and even those conditions, these amendments to the Constitution are not enforced. And so you have a Voting Rights Act to make sure that in certain states they don't violate your voting rights. Really? And all these others ways that they're not supposed to discriminate against you. But that's right there in the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. Okay, so it's like this conundrum, right, that we're going around in. And Du Bois did understand that. That would have enraged anybody who had lived that long and saw all of that. Can you imagine being someone born in 1868, right after the Civil War, aware of the Reconstruction Amendments? Okay. Yeah. By the time you are old enough, you're moving through all those decades and you're not seeing the kind of progress. They keep rolling us back. Yeah, I think he was infuriated. However, I think, this is my criticism of what Nkrumah says about him. That was a revolutionary move on the part of Du Bois to leave the United States, revoke his U.S. citizenship, and become an ancestor in Ghana. That was revolutionary for him.
Right, right. Doc, I just want to say to Johnny Brown. So Johnny Brown, it's a Johnny Brown. He's in the chat. Johnny, you're coming off as an agent, Johnny. I'm really thinking about calling him Agent Johnny, right?
Oh, okay.
In the chat. Oh, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were funded by white people. They were funded by white supremacy. And Johnny Brown, Agent Johnny Brown. Can you please tell us where would Booker T. Washington have gotten the money from, sir? Agent Johnny Brown. Yeah, where would they have gotten the money in the late 1800s to do what they wanted to do? And when they did get the money, how did Booker T utilize the money? Because Agent Johnny Brown, I know you're on the take, and I know that you get funding from white people, and I want to know how you're using that funding from white people that you get on your job to change or improve the condition of the Black diaspora. You have the floor, Johnny Brown. Tell us in the chat how you are using the money that you make from your government job, because you come across like an agent, Johnny. Right. You come across like an agent. Even your name, Johnny Brown, it sounds like an agent here. And so, Johnny Brown, I just want you to tell us, how are you using your coins to liberate Black African people? I'm waiting for your response in the chat. And I want you to also tell us, Agent Johnny Brown, where would they have gotten the money? What should have been their source of money in the late 1800s when we were fresh out of chattel slavery? So I'm waiting on your answer, Mr. Johnny Brown. Go ahead, Doc. You have the floor.
Well, but that's also the same thing. I mean, so do you guys think that the NAACP wasn't funded by white people? It certainly was. I mean, and white people are allowed to join the NAACP, white liberals in particular, even today, like that's why like a Rachel Dolezal or whatever her name was could be the president of a NAACP chapter. I mean, I don't know see people. So pick up a book and try to get closer to some historical facts as opposed to like opinions. So people have opinions. Yeah, sure. The money that Washington is sort of, I'm going to stay true to my Tuskegeean, stripes and not use the real terminology that we say at Tuskegee, but yeah, nobody's ashamed that Booker T. Washington took white folks' money and brought it home to Tuskegee to serve Black people. I mean, I really, and I'm going to keep it like that because Tuskegee still exists, like unlike many industrial and vocational sustainable communities, right? It's a very different institution now, but there's still some understanding of it. And I know Booker T. Washington's great granddaughter. She read the book. She sent me a card, a beautiful card.
Beautiful.
Yeah, she's 90 something years old. You know, she's probably like, I don't know. She's in her mid to late 90s. His granddaughter, only living granddaughter. That being said, so Washington, think of him as a Robin Hood figure. That's all I'll say. And let's be very clear about um, American wealth specifically. So African people are the human extraction site for white wealth. Okay, we are the human fuel of their wealth. So while you are using our bodies, you have to understand this in the most explicit and raw way. I'll give you an example. In Mississippi, Mississippi planters become millionaires before in the 18th century, 1700s, as a result of cotton and enslaved African labor. You're talking about the peasant class of Europe, the peasant class of British society, people who are from the underbelly and the bowels of British society coming to America and being millionaires. Millionaires. Some of y'all are hoping to be millionaires now, but we're talking about millionaires in the 18th century. For the first time in their, that is how exploitative the labor was. Let me tell you something. If we took all of that money back, it wouldn't be nobody shame in that game. Okay. Now, this is how you should judge things. Then or now, money is not a value. I know some people would say, what are your values? Oh, I value money. No. Whatever you value, you will spend your money on.
That's a fact.
So let's talk about who you spend your money on, who Booker T. Washington spent his money on.
That's a fact. That's a fact. So, Doc, I want to show your book one more time. I got to show it. I have to show it. I have to show it. I have to show the website. Or I should
say who you spend or what you spend your money on, right?
That's right. That's right. So family, I see a lot of people are giving you, your flowers, Doc, in the chat. They love it.
People read it at the same time.
Oh yeah, I know. Sometimes when I'm on platforms, I don't read the comments either because it's always like you have your, it's just I don't want to be distracted first and foremost.
Right.
And I'm talking about when I'm the speaker, right? Like when I'm
right.
When I moderate, when I'm having an interview, I'm looking at the chat and stuff like that. But when I'm the actual speaker on a platform, I don't read the chat because you don't know, they're going back and forth and things are being said, and then you got trolls and all of that. But they've been giving you your flowers in the chat. Absolutely. Even Sister CK the poet, she wanted to research you a little bit more and to get more familiar with your work, and she asked about your PhD. And I told her that you never mentioned it, but PhDs and dissertations, that stuff is public information. So I asked her to Google you. But could you share your educational background with the listening audience?
So I went to undergrad at Tuskegee. I was a history major. I studied African American and U.S. history at Tuskegee, and I engaged some of this information that you probably see me mention in the preface if you get the book. I come back to New York, and I enter a master's program where I got a master's of arts in history, and my study, my research path or my specialization, so to say, is modern African history, the period of liberation struggles. So I basically initially I write a thesis on um, I write a thesis on the necessity of armed struggle in Kenya. And then it didn't get approved because my advisor said, you're not going to get enough primary sources. Everybody's dead. And I actually write my master's thesis on Booker T. Washington in Africa, directly as a result of finding two articles that I mentioned last time, Booker T. Washington and African Nationalism by Manning Marable, and Booker T. Washington and the White Man's Burden by Lewis Harlan. That gave me the laundry list. And there's a whole bunch of stuff we still didn't talk about, but we'll have to, in your study group.
Yeah, we'll do a part
right.
3.
And so that's the first time I write anything about Washington Africa. Anyway, I actually attended Temple University and did graduate work there for a couple of years, but I wasn't going to pan out with the PhD. I leave the country. I teach at the University of Sheikh Anta Diop in Africa, come in Senegal specifically, and I come back and I graduate from Union. It used to be Union Graduate School, but it's called Union Institute and University. It's the same institution that James Turner and all those folks over there come from, Dr. Hunter. And I got a PhD. It's actually in public policy and social issues. So public policy is in the same realm as political science. And so how I tend to theorize is as a historian, but the political history. So in other words, I study usually political history, war policy, policies in general, which why you can see in this book, what am I studying? It's historical, but there are two policy cases in the book. Okay. And those policies, I'm assessing the policy. And usually what you do when you study policy is that you're looking at who it benefits and how the policy is structured, because policy very often is as racist or non-racist as the policy maker, right?
Hold on, say it again, Doc. I missed that. That quote. I missed that. You said that the policy. What did you say, Doc?
So I generally study policy because policies are either as racist or non-racist as the policy maker. So the policy maker, if the policy maker has internalized racism, they will construct racist policies. And because, a lot of time we like to legitimize American society, and it's quite simple. Studying power, studying policy is also a study of power, right? But there's some Western theorists who really make it plain and talk about it's simple. The people in power control, right? So people in power. So there is no right and wrong in this Western culture. The people in the power create right and wrong, create the laws, right? What's criminal, what's not. And so when you see policies constructed, people are always trying to legitimize it. It's not necessarily legitimate. It's just that the people who constructed that policy had the power to do so and enforce it. And so policies are only as racist or not as the policy maker. If the policy maker has racist objectives in mind, then the policy will be racist. Right? If you see in the case that is here in this book on the African exclusion measure, James Reed, we can attach a name to the policy. He is a senator from Missouri, infamous Missouri, no different than, right? The southern state in the north, a slave state in the north. That being said, what does he do? He overtly says, exclude anyone of the Black or African race. No shame in his game. And he gets accolades from his, his constituents, his colleagues there in the Senate. They're like, yeah, you hit it on the head. That's right. We'll go with that.
No, that's a
That's
fact.
how it goes. Right. And
That's
so,
a wait.
yeah, so that's that. I mean, the policy is as racist as he was. He was an overt racist. The policy is overtly racist.
Facts.
Okay, and so that is where, and so my path in general, and as a researcher, I generally look at policies that impact African people globally, not just within the United States. I definitely take a look at that internationally, and I look at when the United States constructs policies that impact racist policies that impact African people globally. And the African exclusion measure case is the perfect example of the kind of work that I do. So it's not a surprise that, um, you know, I would uncover such a case. I mean, it existed, and I knew where to find it. And I knew there were little crumbs left, for me to find it, and it's in the congressional record. So that's precisely the kind of work I do, looking at how policies impact us globally.
Thank you, Doc, for that. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So, family, right now you're looking at her book, Booker T. Washington in Africa. Family, we are going to be reading this book. Okay, this is the next book or the next read for the Read Book Club. Okay, it's the Read Book Club, and so this is our next book. We're going to discuss the preface. I know, Doc, you say preface. I used to say preface, and then I Googled it one day. It said preface. So,
Oh, it's
so the
preface.
it's
Okay.
preface. So the preface. We're going to discuss the preface in chapter 1 on
Uh-huh.
May the 8th, family. May the 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, family, please get your book as soon as possible. Several of you have already ordered.
Oh yeah, a lot.
Yeah. Several of you have already ordered. I see some people grab 2 copies at a time. Family, please get this book on May the 3rd. Your book will be shipped, okay? And literally, it's only like 11 pages that you have to read in order to prepare for the discussion on May the 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this channel. Family, please visit Booker T. Washington and Africa.com to get your copy. You're looking at it on the screen. You come to the website. When you get to the website, you navigate on over here to the third link. Order the book. You click on the link. You scroll down the bottom. You click buy now, and you can pay, via credit card, PayPal, or whatever. Okay. All right, family. So, Doc, I have to.
Uh-huh.
I have to. I
Thank you
have.
so much.
Oh no, Doc. Thank you for all of your all of your hard work. But I normally I always have to drop a bomb for my guests, and I should have had it. Look,
You.
I should have had it ready. Should have had this bomb ready. But you
That's
were
okay.
phenomenal tonight, as always. It's always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
and thank you for
Pleasure talking
having
to
me
you.
back, because
No problem. No
it's been a
problem.
pleasure.
No problem. And hold on, I gotta give this to you.
Okay. Okay.
It was so much fire. It was so much fire, Doc. It was
Thank
so much
you.
fire in this interview. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with my listeners and I tonight. You got to
Thank
come
you.
back for part 3. Now tell me,
Yeah.
you said I didn't get through everything. So we in part 1 we discussed Booker T. Washington and the Tuskegee model, the Tuskegee machine, and Booker T. Washington. Tonight we discussed Booker T. The true nature of the relationship
Between
between
the
Booker T.
Boys and
Washington.
Washington.
So what is part 3? Tell me what you said. You said I haven't
Uh,
gotten through it. So what would you want to do for
so
part 3?
so the most controversial of the chapter that I wrote in the book was chapter 4, and it is a litany. It's about his transformation, and so you have Booker T. Washington writing, propagandizing against the atrocities in the Congo. Some people probably didn't know that, but he was one of the most vocal individuals in the press writing against King Leopold, to the degree that King Leopold's aide contacts Washington because he ended up bringing so much attention to the issue. Washington was smart. He didn't go to Belgium to like let them prove their point or anything like that. He was like, no, 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 I'm not going there. But he aggressively propagandized against atrocities in Congo. He is vice president of the Friends of the Congo, which still exists today. Shout out to Maurice Carney. He is the president of Friends of the Congo. And we talk about this all the time because a lot of people don't people don't know. So, but then also in that same chapter, in that chapter, I basically run down all of the stuff that Harlan and Manning Marable came across, and I give you a different angle of it, meaning they give you cursory um, knowledge of it. I actually go and recreate those relationships and give you direct correspondence between Washington and numerous founding members of the ANC in South Africa, numerous African nationalists on the continent. I heard Professor Small mention Chilembwe of Malawi, who engaged in an anti-colonial massacre, who was communicating with Washington. All of these people are transforming Washington. They are influencing him. It would be wrong to think, and I say this in the chapter, it would be wrong to think that they're contacting him, he's communicating with them, and they're getting something from him. What he is getting from them is first-hand knowledge of what the condition of African people is on the continent under colonialism. He's communicating with Bishop Henry McNeil Turner and starts to talk about well, I have to seriously, because I know you, I have to seriously consider a back to Africa move. And because of that, I have looked at all over the continent. Now, he doesn't say he's going back to Africa. However, he's like, I noticed that they are all over the place. Europeans, they have colonized everything. In the places they haven't colonized, they put this weird classification on as spheres of influence. So all of this education is happening, and simultaneously, he has this experience with what? The Togo, which is catastrophic. Okay? Which is part of the reason why when he's given the opportunity to be involved in Liberia, he already knows like the continent has been eaten up by European nations. Okay? When the idea, so he knows that that's one uncolonized territory. Ethiopia is the other. This is part of the reason why when he gets the opportunity, he's like, no, we've got to preserve Liberia, and goes through unusual lengths to do that. You will see that in the case. It gives you the details of the Togo. And we didn't get to talk about it, and I'm going to just let folks read it for themselves. But I give you the correspondence, what some of the Tuskegee graduates who some people wrongly said, like, really? Are we that powerful? Like 9 of us can go to a country and colonize a country that's already colonized by the Germans? Some of the most violent damn people on the earth.
Right.
Really?
Right.
So 9 little people. So I'm a Tuskegee alumni. 9 little people like me with expertise in cotton production can go and colonize a whole African territory? No. Go and read the correspondence. What are those 9 graduates saying? They're talking to Booker T. Washington and other people, saying like, this thing here with the Germans is bad.
Right.
Okay, we're going to share with them some practices, how they can build more sustainable houses. We're going to share. They're working with the people. They're not. So, see, this is why ignorance, but willful ignorance is a problem, right?
Absolutely.
So, we need to read, but those letters are still there. I actually am the person who identifies who some of those 9 students are, okay, and what that experience. But that is like a super low point for Washington. he's all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, just like, yo, we're gonna put some Tuskegee graduates on the continent, and you know, they're gonna be, you know, using their skills. Wrong, 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 wrong. Everybody dies. Low point. But you have to understand, from that period all the way to 1907, 1908, he's getting a crash course in Africa, really. You know, the dynamics on the ground, the reality, the colonial situation, the use of Christianity to advance colonialism, all of those things. He's sharply credited, you know, he writes an article called Christianizing Africa. And he says, you know, do the warriors here in South Africa, do they have any claim on the streets of London? And so you all have no right to claim the streets of South Africa.
That's right.
Europeans, he's speaking of. And he sharply criticizes, which is also why I'm able to say, hey, he knows the forest from the trees. He's not confused about this thing with regard to religion, right? Because most Europeans during that period, and even now when they are engaging Africa, will do it under religious auspices. And it's really like, come on, there's a economic, there's a colonial, there's a capitalist. Some of y'all are mad at me saying that, but yes, there's a capitalist objective, right? So, you know, don't think of capitalism as free market, but think of capitalism as money over flesh. And we do need to understand, as African people, I always tell my students this. Sure, you can, if you're thinking about free market competition or whatever, sure, you're able to make capital, and that's how you think of capitalism. But don't ever forget the true our encounter with capitalism. We were right in fuel.
Absolutely. And a nice book on it. A good
bought and sold.
Absolutely. Right? And Doc, a good book on that will be Capitalism and Slavery.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. By Dr. What was the brother's name? I know Eric he passed.
Williams.
Yes, Eric Williams. Absolutely. Yeah. That would be a good book.
Right. Right. So, I mean, so we can never forget that. And so he is critical of that. He sees that. He sees Christianity being used all over Africa in that vein. Okay. And he has his ear to the ground. And how does he get all this information? He's getting it directly from continental African people. I give you all the correspondence. I recreate. So what I do is
wait a minute. And Doc, that's in here. We're going to touch on that in here.
Yeah, chapter 4.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh, yeah, I can't wait.
Every single African student that I get an utterance, or African nationalist, anybody coming from Africa, writing from Africa, anything related to Africa and Booker T. Washington is in there. So if anybody drops a name, I'm like, so put it this way, Lewis Harlan and Manning Marable drop all of the names, but then they tell you what it means. What I do is that I go to the Washington papers and I find those letters.
I love it. I love it.
And I put those letters in this book, and I do the interpretive, but I give you a lot of the actual conversation.
Right. So like
just
you said,
like I did with Dubois.
Yep. I got you.
And listen, I'm breaking conventions here. Certainly I don't care, right? But I'm breaking conventions. Those of us who know about writing and all that, because like, don't be using those block quotes, you know, do that. You're supposed to, you know, right? You're supposed to, like, you know, write it out or give your interpretation. Nah, not with Booker T. Washington, because y'all wouldn't believe me.
Right.
So here you go. You got his own words. And then I come in and I do my work as the interpreter, right? The historical interpreter. But you have John Dussault, all of chapter 4, you even get pictures of the African nationalists that he's dealing with, right? Simi Duze Muhammad Ali, who's Ethiopian born, also is stationed in Nigeria selling Garvey's paper, The Negro World. They have a bit of a dialectical network going on from the continent to it's chapter 4, Dr. Maat. So from the continent to the United States and back, you have all of this communication going on. And Washington is right up in there, having a whole bunch of conversations. So on page 82, I give you some images of several of the people. Duzay Muhammad Ali, so he's Egyptian born editor of the African Times and Orient Review. And people who study this period know all about him. And he's also the distributor of Garvey's Negro World. So you can see that connection. Washington, Garvey, Duzay, Muhammad Ali on the continent and back, right? They're all
Wow.
in communication with each other, right? So then I have John Chilimbwe and wife, said to be a follower of Booker T. Washington in Malawi, but he's also someone who, he scorched the earth there. And then John Tango Jabavu and Don Tango Jabavu of South Africa, both the father, the senior one, a founding member of the ANC. Pixley Ka Asaka Simi of South Africa, also involved in the founding member of the ANC. Casely Hayford of the Gold Coast. All these people are communicating with him. That's why they're being mentioned. Okay, there you can see some of them there. I give you images of them. And then, of course, John Dube of South Africa, also involved in the ANC. And then I give you others, Jabavu and others who are communicating with Washington. And they're getting advice from him, but he's like trying to pinpoint the nature of their oppression and their condition there. So they are transforming him as well, right? He is getting an intimate education from them, and he admits this much. Okay, it's not like I'm just doing that interpretive aspect of it. He knows that he has no other way to know of the condition except for through the people who are having the experience. And so he is eager to have that conversation with many of them. Some of them actually come to Tuskegee and visit. I think it was Jabavu who made the comment. He wrote the pamphlet about my Tuskegee pilgrimage, and he actually comes to Tuskegee, visits Hampton, visits Tuskegee, and then he goes back and is disenchanted with Washington, and then goes back to a hostile South Africa and realizes, like, oh yeah, that's right. When you're surrounded by hostile, racist whites, you ain't got time to be cheesing and smiling and exactly that social when you are responsible for a whole community of people, and you've got Southern whites during the Nadir 1895 to 1915, where they're slaughtering Black people by the dozens, okay, lynching them, hanging, tar and feathering them, I mean, um, so
He was strategic. He was
yeah,
strategic. And that's where it kills me, where people look how he was acting. Like you said, this man was responsible for a system, right?
right.
Of people. So it was certain things that he could not do. Like you said, he hardly showed himself. It was certain
No, he
ways he
didn't.
had to move because of the environment. And I'm gonna let everyone go because I know we kind of went off on a tangent.
Yes, right.
But when people study, our ancestors, our heroes, our historical figures, historical context is very important. Understanding the culture, the climate at the time is very important. So
Right,
they want him to be out there with his chest poked out with the system. Like you said, you look to the left, he's in the South. I mean,
right.
I just, what, Doc?
But he could be in the north. I mean, like it's
I mean,
both.
but
I mean,
exactly,
like
it was both.
Professor Small, right? Yeah, like,
Absolutely. But
but
Doc, people kill me with the living in the 21st century where I'm not gonna say the climate is different, but where
it's
certain
not.
things have, yeah, but where certain things we're not contending with like they were. It's not the same exact.
But let me say this:
Mm,
the things Booker T. Washington, like I said before, is saying directly
mm,
to white people. We're not talking to white people in positions of power. like that now. We are not. So go ahead and read the book and you will see. But we are not talking. He's telling them what to do for Black people. Y'all afraid to say you want anything for Black people.
Facts. In
you
2022.
Like, well, I got to take care of my kids and my family. But other than that, you don't want to be caught dead doing nothing for Black people, because it means your job. The condition of your presence in whatever institution means you will not serve your own. You won't even look your own in the eye. You don't want nobody to see you have eye contact with them. I'm just being real. That is real. That is real. But Doc, we've been on for 2.5 hours. Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, we've been on. So what I'm going to do, family, is I'll bring her back because Doc, you said you wanted to come back for part 3. So what I'm thinking is once the book club reads your book, to bring you back on to have a discussion with the book club members, bring you on, and we can kind of just unpack the book and what we learned, and and give people an opportunity to ask you questions about any of the information that you presented in the book. Family, thank you so much for tuning in. Doc, do you have any closing words for the listening audience?
No, just thank you again for having me. I enjoy it.
Likewise.
Sure. When you're reading a book, I'll be happy to field some questions.
Beautiful.
In real time. And just so you all know, the book that this is right here, this isn't the revised and expanded. This is the book that you want to have, the original, which is a lot. It'll be worth quite a bit of money because it's going to go out of print.
I need to get a couple of copies.
Once the revised and expanded edition it's the rawest form. So
brother Kevin did right. Brother Kevin grabbed 2 books. So
yeah,
I'll order another one. A couple of them just to kind of keep. Like I said, once it goes out of print, it's over.
Right.
Once it goes out of print, it'll be on Amazon for like $1,000.
Oh yeah, I mean the first couple of runs of the book, I mean we did a certain number, and then students, a lot of people adopted the book in their classrooms. I used the book for modern Black and African political thought. I taught a couple of semesters, and then the next thing you know, you saw the book on Amazon for $177.
Wow!
It went from $80-something to $177.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get a couple of books because I'm gonna be one of those ones. You're gonna see Dr.maat on there. The book will be 1,000.
Rare book. Yeah, it was a rare book seller. Was selling a friend of mine called me up, was like, "Do you know your book is on Amazon for $177?"
Hey. So like I said,
like, all right. But then we went to press again later on after that and stuff like that. So I had, I wasn't mad, but yeah, I was like, okay.
Absolutely. All right, Doc. So peace and love to the family. No problem, Doc. Thank you so much for tuning in. Family, thank you so much for hanging with us. I know we've been on for like 2.5 hours. Yes, but thank you so much, family, for hanging with us. I hope that you learned, a great deal, of new information. I know I surely did, Doc. Every time I talk to you, whether or not it's on the phone or when we're having a public discourse, I learned a great deal from you. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. Thank you so much, Doc. Peace and love, family. Peace and love.
Let's combat and fight back with maltracks. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.